The CCCR, or Centre for Creative and Cultural Research, investigates the ancient, innovative relationship between social culture and creative production. Based in the Faculty of Arts and Design at the University of Canberra, we generate scholarship and artwork in a wide array of humanities, social science, applied and creative disciplines. You are listening to a fresh presentation from the CCCR's Culture and Creativity Seminar Series. The presentation was delivered with slides. To view those slides, or to learn more about the Centre's work, please follow the links in the program notes. This podcast was recorded on the unceded lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples. Hi everybody, my name's Paul McGee. I'm the Director of the Centre for Creative and Cultural Research here at the University of Canberra. I'd like to start these proceedings by acknowledging that we are on the unceded lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples. Respects to all elders, past and present, and to all Aboriginal people here today. Today, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Joel Bennett. Joel is a lecturer in digital media and game development here at UC. He's a designer and a technology enthusiast with a background in games, animation, and creative media. His work explores how people engage with emerging technologies in screen-based and interactive environments, with a focus on virtual production, extended reality, and digital performance. Joel is author of Facilitating an Immersive Performance Environment in Virtual Production, Routledge 2025, and his current research and teaching support innovative approaches to practice-based learning in digital media and game development. Please join me in welcoming Joel.
Hello, everyone. As Paul has mentioned, my name is Dr. Joel Bennett, and I am delighted to present Exploring Performance, Perception and Presence inside of virtual production. So this presentation follows my kind of academic and professional trajectory within the kind of evolving field of virtual production and demonstrates the combination of some research that I've been doing over about a decade, which has led to the extended immersive performance framework. Naturally, I want to start by acknowledging the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people as well, the traditional custodians of the land which we are meeting today, and I pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. And I'd like to extend that kind of respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders present here today or online. So I thought I'd just start simply with who am I? As Paul kind of mentioned, I'm a researcher, an educator, a designer, and a technology enthusiast. So I have some bias towards technology. And you may be wondering kind of why is that important? Well, it matters because kind of this presentation is situated in the intersection of creativity and technology, where I investigate emerging tools that reshape both the industry practice and education. But before I dive into the research side of things, I wanted to spend a little bit of time explaining what virtual production is for those people that are not aware of it in this room, because it's kind of unique and it's been emerging for some time. Virtual production has been constantly evolving as it's kind of emerged, and the term for virtual production hasn't really kind of solidified yet, but it kind of focuses on the intersection of both physical and digital filmmaking. Really, the power of virtual production is the ability to see and interact with physical and digital elements in real time on set during a production. And there are several technologies that have kind of emerged over the years that have enhanced this ability to create a virtual production, which I'm going to explore briefly in this presentation before diving into the research side of things. So starting off with motion capture, it's been around for some time now, and it is the process of capturing movement, anything or anyone. There are several approaches to use motion capture, but I'll be focusing on the two common ones used in the kind of entertainment industry. And I want to also kind of give a nod to video motion capture, which is coming more and more a reality with AI. But the ones I'm going to focus on are inertial motion capture and optical motion capture. Inertial motion capture is effectively a bunch of miniature sensors similar to what's found in everyday smartphones. So it's got an accelerometer, gyroscope, and it kind of knows its relationship to the world through those pieces of technology. On the other hand, you've got optical, and it uses a series of infrared cameras that create a physical space, commonly referred to as a volume, which can capture the movement using retroreflective markers. There's also active markers that can be contributed here that are used in some external setups to help essentially these optical systems in kind of changing environments. But that's essentially the gist of it. I've been utilizing these systems since kind of their emergence over the last like 15 years. And I've had the great pleasure of working on many different productions, both, professional and research based, to get the experience I have today. So if you've managed to walk through a design setup during Open Day over the last few years, I've had our own optical motion capture system set up with a student performing in there as a virtual character, typically an ogre or something like that, to demonstrate how this system works. And it always attracts eyeballs because it's very interesting, and it's kind of what is used a lot in contemporary film and game production today. Naturally, I'll dive deeper into these approaches, but this presentation is more about establishing the extended immersive framework, not about geeking out about the technology. So on top of motion capture, you've also got what's called facial capture. This is a completely separate system because the face is kind of the window into the soul. It's where a lot of the performance comes from in both games and film production. So there's a lot of nuance, and so it requires its own dedicated system. And so essential facial capture is a crucial component to capturing an actor's performance. That's facial capture, some headsets. So we've got kind of webcams can be used. We've got head-mounted smartphones, which the technology is getting quite advanced that you can do that. It didn't really exist when I started doing research. And then we've got head-mounted cameras, deliberate systems designed around capturing the face. And a lot of time these systems have two cameras just so it can get kind of the nuance across the face and have more robust data. It's the same with video capture. If you're capturing using video, the more cameras you introduced into the system, the better the data that you have and the more accurate the capture is. So that leads to performance capture. And this term has kind of only come out over the last 10 years, over the last decade. It wasn't really used, but now it's heavily used in the industry as a way to describe not just the capture of the motion of someone, but the emotion. And that's a huge thing in performance. So it's not just capturing the nuance of the movement of the body, but it's capturing the face and everything that the actor is doing. And the whole thing about performance capture is making sure that nuance and that performance is carried over to the final product, that it is still the actor. And Andy Serkis has been a big proponent of arguing against the fact that performance capture is acting, because in the earlier days, it was kind of disregarded or confused with the animator having a hand, but the animator is there to ensure that that performance is authentic. Then one of the last systems I wanted to talk about is the virtual camera system. So these have various different names depending on the production's context that you look at, but these systems essentially replicate traditional film cameras, but allows the director and the cinematographers to see a window into the virtual world, into the performance of those actors as their virtual characters in the virtual environment, in the virtual reality kind of thing. So not only can they see the physical performance in a traditional reality sense, they can see the virtual performance in the virtual reality sense. And the powerful thing about the virtual camera system is it is kind of has the ability to change and adapt. You don't have to swap lenses. It's a click of a button. You don't have to change the different depth sensors and stuff like that. You can do that after the fact. So it creates a lot of control in and during the production, but also after the production. We can also just not use the virtual camera system and move cameras around after the fact when you've recorded everything digitally. And the most recent emergence of technology into these virtual productions is what's called LED video walls, or LVWs. And it's sometimes referred to as in-camera visual effects. Something I would really love to get here one day. My head of school's here. He already knows. I talk to him all about it all the time. Can we get a virtual camera, virtual wall in here so we can do some virtual production? And these walls create a dynamic video background that simulate the perspective and parallax of a camera during filming, and it also provides context for the actors to perform in, which is like a very important thing. Now, this has been around for a long time, these video walls, and it kind of can go all the way back to Aristotle's kind of comments on the cave and the allegory of the cave, which I talk to students all about all the time. But they are also called caves, which stands for Cave Automatic Virtual Environments, essentially. Overall, this technology is quite expensive, especially if you're looking at filming in a larger space. Then the last thing I wanted to talk about is stagecraft. So Industrial Light and Magic have paired LED walls with physical sets, and they've kind of coined the term stagecraft. It's heavily used by ILM. They're probably the leaders in that environment. And you can look at franchises like The Mandalorian from Star Wars. It is a really prime example of that technology being used. Essentially pairing the outskirts as digital and the inserts as kind of physical. So this provides a tangibility to the set, which is really important. It's something that's only just emerging, and I'm going to talk a little bit about it towards the end because I'm doing more research around actors and their kind of experience in these virtual productions. And essentially, I'm just continuing my research. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is all this technology wouldn't be possible without game engines. And that's where kind of my background comes into play. So game engines are the kind of bread and butter. All this technology connects to the game engine. All the virtual worlds that we're creating are doing that. And the motion capture data are feeding through that to virtual characters. Without kind of the software of game engines, all of this technology wouldn't really have a place to work. And it provides the ability to do everything in real time on the fly on the production set instead of in a post-production sense, which was something that was traditionally used, many years ago. In an ideal scenario, establishing a virtual production studio adjacent to Workshop Showroom would enable us to do this kind of stuff as well, which I've just kind of briefly talked about. But it's a very powerful tool and something that we're already exploring just by utilizing VR technology and stuff like that that we have here. Now, to some early examples, Robert Zemeckis was a pioneer for virtual production in the early 2000s, and he kind of developed films like The Polar Express, Beowulf, and A Christmas Carol. All had kind of really advanced technology in there, but also had a lot of commentary around what's called the uncanny valley, that fakeness that we see. And so the uncanny valley actually comes from theories on robotics. The closer you approach human likeness, the more unsettling it gets until you kind of get over the hump and it's almost indistinguishable. And we are at that point. If we think about it, this has only been happening for about 25 years from these films in the early kind of stages to now. And there is so much virtual production and virtual character work in films that you wouldn't actually be aware of. And it's quite astonishing. The example I wanted to talk about that really kind of crossed that bridge was Avatar. And conveniently, this is around the time where I started pursuing my academic career and research in general. But what happened was it was a catalyst for what we would traditionally call virtual production these days, advancing performance capture, virtual cameras, and real-time visualization into a fully integrated filmmaking process. What truly started to kind of take shape here in the film was on the cutting edge of innovation, much like AI is today. And AI is obviously feeding and fueling the advancement of this technology. What's really kind of cool about this is seeing the sequels to Avatar come out and the advances in the technology and pipeline that they've created. And obviously, if you've watched the latest Fire and Ash, it's breathtaking, the visuals and the fidelity that they have in that film and the integration of everyday characters, human characters. It's almost perfect. Like I said, I'm an enthusiast, so I'm going to obviously dote over this technology and the advances that they've made. But it's been a really kind of good sense. And I mean, the main thing I've taken from James Cameron's commentary on it is now that we've got this technology down, we need to figure out a way to make it more accessible and cheaper because it's expensive. So I've got a behind the scenes of kind of virtual productions And I'm specifically focusing on the behind the scenes of the Avatar set from 2009. And it provides a glimpse in how virtual production looked in practice, showcasing the advanced technologies that enabled filmmakers to blend the live performance with virtual environments and digital environments. In fact, these sets have not changed significantly over the years, and it's important to take note of this for my presentation as we move towards the research that I've been conducting. Now, why virtual production? Why does it matter? It matters because it has proliferated or is prolific across the entertainment industry. In fact, half of the 10 highest grossing films have employed a form of virtual production in its development, including Avatar 2009, Avengers Endgame in 2019, The Way of Water in 2022, The Force Awakens in 2015. How many can I do really quickly? Avengers Infinity War in 2018, Spider-Man No Way Home in 2021, and Jurassic Park in 2015. Plus, this doesn't even consider game developments. It's just looking purely at film. In game developments, if it's narrative heavy, it's probably utilizing virtual production. And there are actors in there performing as they would in film productions. And if I tried to list the games that did that, would be here forever. I'd run out of time. But it's just showing kind of the impact of that in a commercial, professional sense. A virtual production is here to stay. It's not going anywhere. And in fact, it's kind of a component of these VFX-heavy films that do quite well for themselves. I'm a big fan. I think I've watched every film on that list in the top 10. I'm a film buff, which is really important. I didn't have a TV aerial for like 10 years of my life. My mum just didn't decide to buy one, so I went to Video Easy every week. Got 7 weeklies and all the new releases, and that was my life. So it's kind of ingrained in me. And only since I've had kids have I stopped going to the cinemas like every 2 weeks. But soon I'll be getting back into it, taking them instead. So let's talk about my experience. So I just wanted to kind of talk about where my academic journey began in 2009. I kind of did some honours research looking into virtual production and how it can be adopted into small scale projects and embedded into teaching practice for Queensland's University of Technology. They had 2 systems there that were building dust. Essentially, they brought them but didn't know how to use them. And so I took the initiative and did some research around that. And that's where I really kind of fell in love with virtual production techniques, and saw kind of the potential of research around it. Then from there, I worked as a freelance motion capture technician, capturing motion capture for various different film projects and game projects, as well as providing educational experiences to students across vet and higher ed. And the most notable ones I would say is probably the Vimmer project, where I got flown out to Finland and worked with a bunch of researchers exploring how motion capture virtual production techniques can be used in live performance. And then I also had the privilege of doing some previs on Underworld Awakening. I think it's the 4th film, but it was sadly uncredited. But they used that pre-visualization to kind of inform the development of their films. And I got to work with some very notable people. There's also a bunch more, but I'm under NDAs and some of them have not been released, so I never get to talk about them, which really sucks. But I worked with a bunch of the game companies up there, capturing a lot of data, which was a privilege. So then I went on and did my PhD. And during my honours year, I noticed something really, really interesting when I was doing my research. There was this commentary from actors about the challenge associated with performing in virtual production. And this challenge wasn't just a couple of actors, it was a large majority of the actors at that time. And probably the only one that would talk fondly of it is Andy Serkis, who kind of mastered the techniques and was kind of maybe kind of like the spearhead of the movement for actors. So the challenge was evident in virtual productions because they heavily relied on performance capture. At present, performance capture offers a limited perceptual feedback to the actors, as virtual characters and environments are usually not visible or tangible during a performance. As a result, the actors have to memorize and imagine objects, obstacles, cues, events, and other virtual characters whilst also delivering their performance. And, if we think about cognitive load, not only do you have to envision yourself as a character, deliver your lines, you have to imagine everything around you, hit your marks, and do all those kind of things. So I was like, that's hard. I've done it. Like I put myself as a kind of practitioner in my early research in my PhD to try and do it. And I'm not a traditionally trained actor, but God, it was challenging. So yeah, many actors describe this process as difficult, distressing, isolating, strange, or intrusive. And if you read any of my research, I've got lots of examples of that, but I'm only going to focus on a few key ones in this presentation because again,
and I didn't get to talk to a face when I was doing it, and a million choreography things to remember. So I've done a lot of theater where there's our technical.
So the video cuts off before she finishes it, but essentially, this is Valerie Curry, and she worked on a short film called Kara for the PlayStation 5 as a tech demo. And she really describes the challenge associated with this technology very clearly and very plainly. She said, more than anything, for me, it was about being present in the space, listening, smelling the room, so that everything can be new in every moment. I think the challenge is just something inherent with motion capture. There is obviously a lot of imagination because there is no set to work with, and I didn't get to talk to a face when I was doing it, and there was a million choreography things to remember. So I've done a lot of theatre work. There are a lot of technical things to remember, but this was a whole different ballgame. It was a lot to remember. The comments speak directly to the technology-first approach that strips away traditional sets to prioritize the effectiveness of the capture, of the motion capture, to capture the performance. This is because the more that you have on a set, the more occlusion it creates between the camera and the actor and those little balls that they have on it, and the less accurate the data is. So you can fix that by introducing more cameras, which cost money, or you can remove stuff from the environment, which costs significantly less money, and put that kind of onus and responsibility back on the actor. And this is where I went, okay, this is actually a massive problem that we need to address. And it's where it kind of kickstarted my PhD. Now, we're all teachers, most of us in this room. We all perform for our students, in my opinion. There's the teacher me and there's the normal me. And not that that's a bad thing, it's just so they make sure that they have a good experience, and I'm a little less kind of animated when I kind of am in normal life. But if you want teacher me, just ask. But I'm going to ask you guys to kind of just take a moment to use your imagination yourself as well. I want to kind of just have a little bit of fun. I want you to pitch yourself on a set and asked to play a towering creature. You need to stride up to the edge of a cliff, find your mark, deliver your lines, and react to a bird swooping past your head. So without kind of stepping into the void, without falling into the pit. The challenge, none of this actually exists in real life. You are imagining it all, delivering your lines, hitting your marks. The bird, the cliff, everything around you doesn't exist. It only exists in the director's monitor. So they can see it, but you can't. So you are kind of left to perform in this empty space. And this is vastly different from traditional production. On traditional productions, you would have a set, you would have actors, you would have props, you would have an environment to work with, which all feeds kind of your performance. Now, I'm not saying that actors can't do this. They clearly can. They've been doing it for years. And if we go to stage productions, it's something that's kind of massively required of them. In fact, a lot of actors love this challenge. It makes it so much more exciting for them. Like Andy Serkis, he was like, I get to do everything. I get to imagine everything while still delivering this performance. And it's amazing. But generally, most other actors would say, it sucks. And that's just me paraphrasing. I don't think anyone actually said exactly those words. This leads into kind of the challenge of the research. And it became clear that this challenge was influenced by the technologies used in virtual production and not particularly by the actors or directors themselves. So to better situate this issue, I adopted the reality-virtuality continuum defined by Paul Milgram and Fumio Kishino, which is now kind of colloquially referred to as the extended reality continuum, or the XR continuum. So XR is made up of 4 key elements. There's the physical reality, So the physical world that we experience every day, the world that we're in now. The augmented reality, where you kind of bring in digital elements into the physical world. So it's about augmenting the reality that you're situated in. There's augmented virtuality, which kind of flips the script and puts you in a virtual world, but punches holes back into the physical world. So your whole experience is in virtual, but elements of the physical are brought back in. And then finally, there's virtual reality kind of at the end, which constitutes you being completely immersed in a virtual reality, which a lot of virtual headsets have done. But we are starting to see what they call extended reality headsets come across, which essentially can take you through this whole spectrum. You can be in AR, you can be in VR, and there's a little dial to switch between it. So these terms are kind of being merged into what's called kind of extended reality. And I think in the future, we're going to see technology move away from these separate terms, and we're going to see kind of technology that can adjust your experience across the spectrum, across the continuum. Now, there's this weird term called mixed reality that has been hard to define because some people misconstrued it as augmented reality or augmented virtuality. But I like to define it as, and this is based off other people's research and kind of the continued evolution of this term, but mixed reality is essentially overlaying a reality on top of physical reality. So I can change this environment as I want, but it will still kind of be situated in the physical. So this lectern might turn into a monster that's still a lectern, and I can still physically touch it and stuff like that. It's completely different. It kind of changes the theme of the world. When we get to that point, I'm going to be very excited because it means that we can kind of interact with the physical world, but fully be embedded in the virtual world. So, one day we'll get holodecks and all that, and it'll be a lot more fun. The other thing that played a major role in my research was phenomenology, and specifically the existentials, the 4 existentials of phenomenology. And this is because it's kind of embedded in our experience of the world. So the lived body, the lived space, the lived time, and the lived other. I'm going to define these briefly. I'm sure a lot of you guys have come across it, but the lived body or corporality refers to the body or the bodily presence in the world. Specifically, it's our subjective experience of it. Lived space or spatiality refers to the felt space of the subjective experience of the space of the world. Lived time or temporality refers to the subjective experience of time as opposed to the more objective clock time. And lived other or relationality refers to relations we make or maintain with others. Our relations include communications and relationships we experience through spaces and interactions we share and create with them. Now, this is really dumbing down phenomenology, in my opinion, and really taking a subcomponent of phenomenology. If you've had the pleasure of doing any research into it and you've dived down the rabbit hole of people like Herschel or Heidegger or Merleau-Ponty, it is definitely an interesting read. And it was something that was quite challenging for my research to kind of take all these different things in, understand them, unpack them. But the challenge was also super exciting at the same time. So building on these 4 existentials, I conducted a series of experiments and case studies exploring strategies to support actors to experience body and space in virtual production. This led to kind of 3 immersive spectrums or immersion spectrums designed to address the challenges faced by actors and reframe virtual production from a technology-focused approach to a human-focused approach. And I think that's the really important thing. Performance and all of that is all about us, humans, people, and telling stories. And that was kind of removed. So bringing it back to that, I think, was an extremely important kind of endeavor. So you'll be able to see the influence of the continuum, the virtual reality continuum, and the kind of existentials, the 4 existentials in this, with a clear mission, which I'll talk about as the kind of presentation goes on. So I conducted a series of experiments and case studies as test strategies to enable the experience of body and space in a virtual production that led to these immersive spectrums. First was bodily immersion spectrum, which kind of ranges from lived body, where the actors performed as their physical body in a real environment, to the virtual body where they perform through a digital avatar in a fully virtual environment. Then we had spatial immersion, which ranges from lived space where actors interact with tangible assets or sets to virtual space where the environments were entirely digitally and constructed through a virtual production. And then also came perceptual immersion. And this ranged from lived perception, where actors draw from real world sense cues and kind of seeing the world around them, to virtual perception, where their awareness and reactions are guided through digitally generated cues and through essentially different technologies. So putting on a headset and being immersed in a virtual environment, seeing that virtual environment versus being in a physical environment. Together, these spectrums highlighted the ways you could immerse or shift the continuum of virtual production and provide a foundation for what would later be defined as immersive performance, as my immersive performance environment framework. So the IPA framework, or IPE framework, was a resulting outcome for my doctoral studies, structured around these existentials and the virtual reality continuum. Overall, the framework focuses on offering a structured approach for diagnosing and increasing the level of immersion for an actor in a virtual production, specifically during a performance. Rather than treating performance as a byproduct of the technology, the framework reframes the production environment as a space designed to actively support the actor. Importantly, it was deliberately flexible, allowing practitioners to adapt or map new strategies and technologies as those practices evolved. And so when the IPE framework came out, I didn't like lead walls weren't really a thing. So it's a really good example of a new technology that has emerged, new process that emerged that can still be mapped to this framework. Because I was very kind of cognizant of the fact that this environment, this virtual production technology and these processes were constantly evolving with the introduction of new technologies and more advanced systems. So this IPA framework shift virtual production from a technology-first process to a human-centered practice, strengthening the relationship between performers, environments, and technology. Now, I didn't end there, as all doctoral research typically happens. I omitted one key element from my research, and that was mainly just due to time constraints. Technically two, I omitted two, but I'm just going to focus on the one that I adopted. So the two components I kind of avoided just for time's sake was the existentials of lived time or temporality and lived other or relationality. So lived time was excluded because altering an actor's subjective sense of time provides little benefit and raises massive ethical concerns. Like what I'm just deteriorating their time and experience of time. That seems like something that's not going to really happen anytime soon. And in contrast, lived other is central to performance. As Ian McKellen noted, I act with other people. I do not act on my own. And this is directly from his experiences performing on a green screen set with no one around him, and he hated it. So this omission led to my recent Routledge chapter publication where I expanded the framework to include lived other. It's also my first Q1 publication, so it was a big deal for me at the time. I was like, oh my God, yes, tick. I've got another one on the way too. So, you know, as an early career academic, it feels very kind of big for me. So this essentially expanded in and adopted what's called the social immersion spectrum, ranging from relationality, you know, the relations and experience we have with others in reality or physical reality, to virtual relationality where the interactions occurs between entities in virtual production. So instead of performing to someone in a physical sense, we're performing to each other in our virtual characters. And that's really powerful. I think that's really important to know. For any person that has the privilege of being not only immersed into virtual reality, but immersed in the way that their body is essentially mapped to a virtual character, it's absolutely insane how quickly your mind just accepts that new body. I'm not going to go into the psychology of it at all because that's not my area of expertise, but it's definitely something that I find very fascinating, that we're just happy to accept this new reality and this new body without any kind of disdain or upsetness. So I just wanted to take a moment. It's hard to see, obviously, on this slide because I'm distilling so much information down into this framework. But if we look at it, I've got social immersion, bodily immersion, spatial immersion, and perceptual immersion mapped on one side with low, moderate, and high immersion across kind of the spectrum. The grey is representing physical reality. The red is representing virtual reality. And as you kind of adapt these various different techniques mapped to these various different modules, you start to provide more immersion for the actor into the performance. So if we looked at social immersions, strategies include stand-in objects and stuff like that for actors. Strategies in moderate is having, instead of stand-in objects, so stand-in objects is like they put a ball on a green stick and they go, yeah, look at this, that's where the person is right here. Then they have stand-in actors where the actors actually perform, and this is becoming more of a standard practice while there is a virtual character. If they're working with people in a physical sense, that they'll be there. And I think Avengers is a really good example of this, where you've got kind of the villain being performed by the actual actor on set, even though they're going to be digitally replaced. And what they do sometimes is add an extra prosthetic in, like my head's actually up here because I'm 3 or 4 feet taller than what I am actually. And there's interesting commentary around this because people would be like, I have to look up here as an actor, but the performance is happening here. So I have to ignore the performance and look there and deliver my performance. So it's this really weird kind of, I want to watch that so it helps me, but I can't watch that, so I have to watch something else. Then we've got strategies as just actual physical actors in there. So that's social immersion. So bodily immersion, this is about obviously your experience as yourself. So strategies includes descriptions and discussions around what that virtual character would look like. So you have a sense of it. And that's really like low for immersion. Then we go into moderate, where strategies such as onboarding, so them being able to experience that virtual character, see that virtual character, and see their performance as that virtual character is kind of really good. And then strategies such as digital clones or prosthetics. So not only do you get to see your virtual character, you get to adapt your performance. And a good example of this is kind of the Planet of the Apes, where they used physical prosthetics to extend their arms and deliver that performance as apes. Or another really good one is Beauty and the Beast, where they actually built a whole contraptional bodysuit that was a one-for-one representation of the beast, but the actor was delivering that performance in that kind of full body prosthetic, which is really cool. And if you've watched that film, that's one of the first time where we had like Bella interact with the beast, and it's almost seamless. It's so beautiful. And it's because the beast was effectively a one-for-one representation of the virtual in the physical. Then we have spatial immersion, and this is working with, in low, we've got inaccurate environmental reference. That's little sticky tape to hit your marks and stuff like that. It might be stand-in objects and stuff like that here and there for you to interact with. Then you've got semi-accurate kind of environmental reference, where it might be a skeleton set. So it still can enable motion capture to happen and provides little impact on the data capture, but it still gives the actors a little bit more to work with. So if they're opening a door, they're not fakely opening a door. There's actually a physical skeleton there of a door to open. And obviously that creates more believable interaction between the virtual and the physical. And then there's essentially highly accurate environmental reference, where they actually do build the sets. And Mandalorian is a good example of this, where they've actually do stagecraft and they build the sets for real, but then wrap that wider environment with LED sets. And so it provides the actors something physically to interact with and physically to see and understand their relationship with these virtual things. Then finally, at the bottom, we have perceptual immersion. So the first one is strategies such as WoW systems, and this doesn't mean wowed for World of Warcraft, that anyone's getting excited. WOW in my research is talking about window on world. So essentially it's a screen. So a monitor, some of you have them here, that you're looking into the physical world. You're not surrounded by it. It's just a window into the world. Then you move up and you've got things like cave systems, like LED walls, projectors and speakers as well, because a perceptual immersion isn't just about visual immersion, it's about auditory immersion and physical immersion, like touch. And this accommodates visuals and audios of the performance, and we're really starting to see the use of LED walls become more prolific with virtual production. And if you hear any of the commentary from actors that have had the experience of performing in a virtual production without the walls and with the walls, it's crazy how much they fangirl over it. They're like, it was like I was there. It's amazing. I love it. And I never want to go back, right? But the problem is cost. And usually it also depends on what makes sense for the production. So they're not going to go use these LED walls and set up these LED walls if they can capture it without it in a lot of senses, because money is commonly the driver in entertainment. And then the final one is HMD systems, head-mounted displays, where you're actually immersing the actor into that physical world. And in my research, I did this and actors really loved it. And there were some issues. First off is when I was conducting my research, virtual reality technology hadn't come as far. So I still had a tether, which obviously impacted their ability to perform. But now those tethers don't exist. The other thing was, by putting on the head-mounted display, you remove the ability to capture the face, which completely derails the process of virtual production, specifically performance capture, because you want to capture the emotion of the face. But even at the end of my research, technology was emerging where they could capture the face with these head-mounted displays, because the next barrier for virtual reality is social immersion. They want you to be able to physically feel present and talk to someone in a virtual sense with your virtual avatar. And we see personas done by Apple and stuff like that, which virtually recreate yourself in a digital, so you can have those experiences. And that's not far off. It's in the early stages of coming out. So whilst HMD systems weren't really a solution at the time, it was clear that they would be in the future, and that we would be essentially immersing actors fully into these virtual worlds to deliver performances as their virtual characters. And if you add prosthetics into the mix of that, they can actually physically feel like them and be the right height and have the right interactions, which saves a lot of pre-production, post-production work for these productions. So in closing, immersive performance environment is the expansion, the immersive performance environment kind of expanded into these new technologies and was adapted. So I had the IPE framework, now I've got the eIPE framework to create a clear distinction. And I always come to this quote that I found really, really early in my academic career, and it was from David Morin, who was the virtual chair of the Virtual Production Committee. He no longer is, but it was in 2006. So it was before virtual production was really massive like it was. It was in those early days. But he said, at some point, virtual will be dropped and it will just be considered production. And I think we're getting there. I think that virtual, using that distinguishment between virtual production and traditional production, shouldn't even be considered anymore, that it's just production and you're utilizing the tools that makes most sense for the production that you're doing. So if you're in a traditional world and you can go to an actual physical location and record that, you would go there. It's cheaper, it's easier. But if you're in this completely fictional world like Pandora in Avatar, then it's easier to go into the virtual production and do that. So although this is an older quote, I think it really captures the fact that, it won't longer be this technology-enabled environment. It will soon become the norm and become kind of back focused on human. And with the rapid growth of AI, I'm pretty sure this trend will continue to accelerate. And the challenge and opportunity is to ensure that technology serves performance rather than the other way around, by keeping human experience at the center of virtual production, or just production, can continue to evolve as a powerful collaborative art form. For those who are interested, references, important. And I was going to do questions, but before I do, I just wanted to talk about one last thing that I think is interesting for me personally as an academic. So I found the discussion and engaging with this during my research of experience of the world of reality really interesting. So if you asked me as an undergrad, I would have very clearly argued with you that there is only one reality, right? It was kind of grounded in this positive thinking, right? We all experience the same reality. If a tree falls in a wood, does it make sound? Yes, it does. Yet my research consistently demonstrated the possibility of immersing individuals into multiple coexisting realities, each experienced as authentic within its own context. So the recognition compelled me to shift my epistemological stance toward constructivism, which acknowledges that realities are not fixed, but constructed through perception, interaction, and experience. In this way, my academic journey mirrored the very phenomena I studied, the negotiation between physical and virtual environments, and the way that human experience reshapes the understanding of reality itself. Thanks for your time. Feel free to ask me any questions.
Okay, thanks heaps, Joel. Yeah, Mike.
Thanks. That's just fabulous. It just opens up the future for all of us, and it's just great to hear this. Your last point was probably what I came back to in your first point, is that there are multiple realities, but there are also multiple existentials depending on our age, our gender, as we move through time. So my perception of time might be different from when I had my untidy bedroom as a teenager, and my perception of others, like interactions with other people. And so it brings into the question that there's not just a question of an actor, not just a question of the environment, not just a question of the technology, but there's a question of the actual individual that's interacting with us. And that individual has a variety of existentials across time and across cultures. And of course, that's a very marketable thing. You could then check out what sort of person you want to market to, or what films you want to make, or whatever. Have you thought about just that question of where you go in terms of, I'm going to call it the actor, but it's going to be eventually the individual?
That's an excellent question. Not something that I've overtly thought about, but it hits true to me. Like, I've got 2 kids now, and I feel like my perception of time has been significantly changed. I feel like I have no time anymore. And I always talk, if anyone's a nerd like me and watch Dragon Ball Z, there's a thing called a hyperbolic chamber where you can go in and time stands still and you can do everything. Because, like, I'll go in there, play all the games I haven't played, watch all the things, play with my kids. But anyway, I think, there is an undercurrent of my research that is kind of trying to appeal to that individual, that all these comments that have driven the research is an individual's commentary of their experience in those various different realities at any given time. So whilst it's not kind of geared towards that individual, more actors as a subjective top level sense, I think that their voices will be and will continue to be a major component of how this technology evolves. And the individual should always kind of be at the center, because we're not watching kind of these performances just for the performances themselves. We're watching it for the individual, right? Like, there are actors that we actually fall in love with the performances that they choose to kind of represent and do throughout their working career. So yeah, I would just say that it's going to be an important factor throughout, and it is obviously an undercurrent of my own study. But yeah, maybe that's more research for me to do as well.
David.
Thanks, Paul. That was fantastic, Joel. And like, I can sort of really see why, with your publications, that, people are picking up, because, this is quite groundbreaking in terms of, really sort of breaking down what's happening in this space of virtual production, which is becoming production, as you say. I'm kind of just thinking though about who this research is for, right? And maybe that's a kind of question around kind of possible next steps, because, there's kind of, you brought up various questions here around, the experiences of performers, for example, like, that it might be troubling or kind of unpleasant, or, or perhaps traumatizing, I don't know, or that performance is diminished in some way, so it's bad for the actual performance. And so I guess kind of that brings up a kind of question of, is it about kind of, is the research gender about potentially actor safety? Is it about quality of production? Is it about performers' experiences and professionalism? Where would you want to position yourself as you're thinking what you can do with this going forward?
You sound like my supervisor. And it is a question it is a question I've answered. And it's a good question, because it is an important one, right? Like, who's it for? Why does it matter? And I would say that whilst actors are the driving voice behind it, it's not for actors in a sense, because actors don't really have a control over the production. on the way that that production is set up and delivered and constructed, right? Who the people that do have control over that are the directors, as well as kind of the motion capture technicians behind it. So the people setting up the spaces, as well as the stagecraft and stage development, prop developers, and so on and so forth. So the research is talking to them saying, there's a problem here. It's clearly articulated. This is a tool, this research, at least the research I've done thus far, is a tool for diagnosing the issues associated with immersing the actor into this virtual environment so they can focus on their performance. And also diagnosing it, but also increasing it, like making it so your actors have more immersion into that performance and stripping that requirement away from them so they can focus on what they're there to do and paid to do and want to do, right? So that's what the research is kind of pointing to. And I think that's what's really exciting and important is that conversation is changing and these technologies are thinking about that. So stagecraft is a really clear response to this like technology-focused environment. They're like, obviously this isn't working, we need to bring that back. And it provides a lot of opportunity for their productions to reduce the amount of work that they have to do afterwards. So it saves money, again, the driver. And then, you know, their lead walls and stuff like that. Nearly every actor is like, they're great. Like, I don't have to think about the world around me because I can now see it whilst I'm delivering my performance. As well as, you know, you're starting to see a step away from actors performing to just green screen by themselves because of actors' commentary on it, going, this is not what I do. I want to act with someone. And so a lot of productions are moving towards just always having actors there as stand-ins. Might not actually be the actor themselves that are doing it, but it'll be someone there delivering lines and delivering a performance the actor can then use. So, you know, the egomaniacal part of me would like to think that some people have read my research and have taken it into account and adjusting their performances because of that. But I think it's just obviously also probably more majority a clear step in that direction based off the commentary that's been happening, based off the kind of actors' experience, and they're going, this isn't working. We need to obviously introduce new ways of doing this, but not only help the actor, but help everyone on the thing. So yeah, and so like I'm curious to see, these studies are only relatively fresh. You know, my recent expansion of the IPA framework only just got published last year. So it'll be interesting to see where other practitioners and other researchers take it as well.
Joel, can I ask you something in that direction? And this is about using the developments you're talking about the wrong way. And what's sparking my question is the poet Vladimir Mayakovsky, who says that you should only ever write about summer in the middle of winter. You know, and he says you should only ever write about romantic love in the most kind of degraded places, you know, go to the worst part of King Cross. So, you know, could you use this to actually put the actor in a virtual environment, which is not that of the fictional world, but quite a different one, so as to spark some sort of, you know, dialectical tension in the performance?
Yeah, I would say definitely, yeah. And that would be a lot of fun to do as well, to see like how different spaces would affect their delivery of the performance and how different characters and so on and so forth would affect the performance. You know, I also think that playing around with time would be a lot of fun and the temporality, but obviously there's more ethical considerations around that. Because we do, like, virtual productions are doing it in a sense, like you can come to a stage and deliver a performance at night, in the morning, and all these. Hopefully I'm answering your question here, but yeah, so like we are doing it in a sense. And what the interesting thing is, I think, and the important thing about my research is a lot of the industry and entertainment is driven by that financial. They're not actually taking a moment to look at the kind of philosophical problems associated with this. They're just looking at the economical ones. So there's definitely going to be this ability for researchers, academics to go back and look at all this thing in a philosophical sense and ask those really important questions that should ideally help the commercial and in the future.
Rick.
Nice one, Joel. As the ex-theatre director in me, it's kind of had a whole bunch of questions. And I realized, well, this isn't necessarily your field, but in talking to actors, did they ever discuss, I guess, their acting methodology and how it that affected them, like the Stanislavski Laskin sort of, coming from within, and the more sort of post that of using physicality as the key to your performance. Did you ever hear them discuss how it affected their acting and their training, and were they able to? Because it makes me think, how does a director direct actors in that situation? And also, is actor training actors to perform like that?
Yeah, so obviously it was a major component of the conversation around their formal training, whether that's the method through Stanislavski or others, because there's several. And embodying the character, and this conversation about it is your job, that's your job. So the fact that the performance environment required you to do more, there was this tension between, well, that's what you do and that's what I do, so that's what I have to do. And then I just go back to kind of, psychology and go, well, there's the thing called cognitive load. There's only so much one person can do at any given point, right? So my argument was we were asking too much of them. But generally, essentially any formal acting training would enable them to deliver a performance. And what was interesting was stage performers adapted more quickly because they're more used to that environment. Their experiences and their performances have been in that environment. And I think Andy Serkis is a good example of this person that really kind of argues for virtual production and performance capture as a legitimate mean, which I'm process, which I completely agree with, because he had so much experience in that space that he was more confident in that space. The conversation that I didn't talk about in this study, but I have in other studies, was the fact that actors do talk about virtual production fondly once they get past that first introduction of it, the fact that they've asked to do so much. They describe it as completely freeing. Because if you think about performance in a sense, you are one individual and you deliver a performance as all these different characters. But then with virtual production, you're no longer constrained to your human body, to your physical form. You can perform as anything, anyone, any gender, in any environment, real or make-believe. That's what they go, holy shit. Sorry for the French, actually. I probably shouldn't have said that. This is actually completely freeing. I have the ability to deliver this performance, as a 10-foot tall, Navi blue character and feed kind of my emotional experience and my training into this performance. So, that's why I think virtual production has really kind of taken hold for the actors, because they see the ability to perform as anything, anywhere, at any time. With training, come back to I feel like I'm answering the question, but there's a lot of things to talk about. Coming back to training itself, yes, there was a gap, right? Performers would come in, not be used to this environment, and have to adjust and adapt to this experience. And it did take them time, and there is always issues. There's one actor that talked about, we've still got these head-mounted cameras, and it provides this depth of experience where it's they sit out maybe a foot in front of your face. I don't know why I'm using feet all the time, but anyway. And so for them to do an intimate performance, they described it as locking horns, because they had to kind of adjust their performance so they didn't hit each other, but still deliver an impactful performance kind of thing. Another one was if I look at the game Resident Evil, they've got this 10-foot character in there, and they put a ball on top of her head to represent where her face was. But the actors constantly were I kept looking at her face because it feels rude to be looking at a bore and delivering a performance, and I feel like I'm missing out on something. And this is something else that multiple actors have talked about. So fighting against the kind of human-centered element of it, where you need to actually perform to the virtual rather than the physical, and kind of disregard that, and that creates a challenge. So there's multiple challenges throughout, but also this idea that it's completely freeing as well. So it's very powerful, I think, and something that shouldn't be ignored. And training, last thing I just want to say, training is getting better. Andy Serkis have created training. A lot of actors are getting that experience. As the technology gets more embedded, there's more opportunities to do it. Whilst in the past, it was a token production here and there. Now it's like every production. So it's becoming the norm.
Joel, time's pressing, but we've got just one last question from Ashley. So I'll just ask for a quick kind of response to this one. And she says, I was really interested in an interview from Tessa Thompson, who was saying how much she learnt from Tom Hiddleston in Thor, who used photographs of the scenes in his trailer to completely imagine the environments and memorise every scene. Did you find anything like that with your work?
Yeah, definitely. So actors obviously do a lot of work beforehand to understand their environments and their performances and their characters, a lot of research. And that's, I think, that talks to my immersive production framework, where you're onboarding the actor themselves, I think, where you're providing information for them to understand, go back, study, and develop and deliver a performance. That's why I was saying, like, actors themselves, like, this is their bread and butter. This is what they do. Like, so they're not inherently scared of it, but when they reflect on it, they go, oh, actually, that was quite hard compared to other performances. When I did my study, it was like, well, it's not their fault that this is happening. It's actually the fault of the technology and the fault of how the production is set up. These productions wouldn't be able to be done without this technology in some senses. So, you know, is it anyone's fault? It's just how the cookie is crumbled, right? So me responding to that and trying to find a solution to that is kind of the pragmatic approach I took to my research rather than the philosophical one. There was a problem. As a designer, I want to fix it. And so there's a lot of solutions to fixing it. And one is obviously the actor getting more information, more ability to prepare before they deliver a performance. But I think the key thing is you want to do it in a production performance. You want to do it as they're delivering their performance, so they don't have to rely on their memory or have to do a lot of prep to do it. It's like I guess that answers it, I hope.
Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you again for that absolutely fascinating presentation.